Izuku Midoriya is born into a world without a quirk. A world that is full of superpowers known as quirks, and the superpowers that he wants, well, would allow him to be like All Might. But the thing is, he's unable to be like All Might. It seems like as the years go by, he lacks the quirk he really needs. And frankly, there's a lot of things in his own head that makes him feel as if he'll never be able to be a hero without a quirk. But there's one person in his life that continues to cheer him on and continues to hope that he can be what he wants to be. And that is his mother. Inko Midoriya continues to tell him that with hard work, with absolute persistence, and with courage, he can be the hero he wants to be. But it's quite the opposite when he arrives at school. From elementary to middle school to anything in between, he continues to hear the same things over and over again. That he's useless, that he'll never be a hero, and that he should just quit right now. Because he'll never be anything greater than what he is now. But Izuku, deep down inside, he knows that he can do it. That he can become what he needs to become to be the hero that he wants to be. But as these voices and as these people continue to tell him to never try, to give up right now, and to give up on his dreams, well, when he gets a little older and older, he begins to feel extremely down about all of these people. These people swarm him with all of these insults. Even Katsuki Bakugo, somebody he saw as his friend, continues to seemingly push him over the edge, berating him, calling him a Deku, and calling him a horrible person, and that he's useless, that he's always going to be useless. And this really hurts Izuku, but the one person that continues to raise him up, his own mother, well, she begins to go through some very interesting complications herself. His own mother begins to go through this odd disease, this kind of sickness that nobody knows or even understands. Izuku would help her as much as possible, but it seems as if she's just never going to be well again. It seems like slowly but surely, the mother he knows is going away. She's disappearing. She's not the same person she once was and seems to be just completely different. The doctors would even say that she's actually falling a little bit short of the test now, and that the day could come quicker than they could possibly imagine. That there may be nothing they could do. That there may be absolutely not a single thing they can do for Izuku and his mother. That his mother, well, seems to be terminally ill and will pass away in the coming months. Izuku would feel sad. He would feel horrible. And all he could think about is, well, I can't do what I want to do. I can't be a hero. I need to make money. I need to somehow supply for our family. I need to make sure that my mother's last days are comfortable, right? That's the things that Izuku wants to do. Make sure that Inko, or his own mother, is comfortable. As he goes through these days, as he takes on part-time jobs, and as he continues to go to school, eventually one day, the call that he's been terrified of would show up. The call that he's been, well, let's be honest, preparing for. He hears it, he answers it, and he hears what occurred, and that his mother has gone. His mother is now officially gone, and he has to keep on pushing forward. He knows how unfair this scenario is, and he knows what this means. But after the passing of his mother, and after everything happened, he would fall under a deep depression. He would be extremely sad, extremely frustrated, angry, and all of the above. And eventually, he would arrive at school. His teachers would speak about people wanting to be heroes, and continue on talking about this or that and hero work this and that other people don't really want to, basically do normal jobs. And Izuku would hear this, and Bakugo would begin berating him, and eventually he would hear the words he would say. He would hear Bakugo tell him that he might as well just go jump off a building and pray that in the next life he has a quirk. Izuku's feelings, Izuku's entire demeanor would change. He would slouch over, he would feel extremely, extremely sad, and he would begin to question himself on everything, question what he should do. And after that day, after the school day was over, he'd take a staircase walking up to the top of the building, and he would stand there. He would look out from everywhere, look around and wonder, maybe this life doesn't have anything else for him. Maybe it doesn't. But still, it doesn't mean he could throw it all away. As he turns around, though, he feels this giant gust of wind and a gust of air feel as if it pushes him. He doesn't jump, but it feels like this push trips him over and he falls straight off the building. Izuku would go spiraling down, falling, and he feels like he's falling for eternity. And as he lands, he doesn't feel anything. He sees something odd. He begins to look, and he sees himself laying on the ground, out cold. But then he looks around. He sees kids running, he sees teachers running, he sees an ambulance arriving, but he sees himself. But as he sees himself, he begins to see other things. Little lights, little what figments of light flying around, and then eventually a transparent hand, a woman's hand, would reach out toward Izuku. And a voice very familiar to one he knows, would tell him that it's not time to give up just yet, because he still has a mission and he still has a dream to fulfill. Izuku would reach out toward that transparent hand, the spiritual hand, and he would grab it. As he grabs it, he'd get pulled up straight back into his body, and he would float up slowly. As Izuku would become conscious once again within his own body, he would be slightly flying off the ground. Everybody would stop, completely shocked at what just happened. Izuku would look around, his eyes glazed over, slightly different now, but not so different than his normal color, because it begins to fade back and he would look like his normal self once again. His eyes going back to that green, and he would land with both feet on the ground. But Izuku would be giving off a different sense of himself, as if everybody around him would get the chills, as if the temperature would drop, as if things around him would just get so much colder, as if he's kind of a ghost of some sorts. Everybody would ask if he's okay, what happened? I mean, seriously, did he really? And then they realize, what did Bakugo tell him to do not too long ago? What did Bakugo tell him to do just maybe 20 minutes ago? To jump off the roof. And, well, Izuku survived, but he did that. Bakugo did that. Everybody would look at Bakugo in disgust, but at the same time, look at him terrified. That they can't believe that he really forced somebody to do that. But it's not necessarily that he forced them. And we know how impressionable children are. And the fact is, Bakugo said to go jump off the roof, and now it looks like that's what happened. Izuku would, well, in the good hardness of what he always is, he would tell them no. That something pushed him. That something, someone, maybe, he doesn't know. But he didn't see it. He didn't see the person. He didn't see anything. He just got pushed. In which many people start believing that maybe Bakugo did it. maybe Bakugo pushed him off the roof, in which Izuku tries to say that that's not the case, but of course, kids, like I said, are impressionable, and they begin to think that Bakugo is basically a murderer, that he tried to kill Izuku. And all that popularity, all of that sway that Bakugo once had, now seemingly is gone. Izuku tries to mediate it, but no, everybody's not hearing it. Izuku's popularity and the love for Izuku begins to skyrocket with how he survived and now what seems to be his new awakened quirk. But Bakugo's, on the other hand, everybody is disgusted of him. Nobody wants to be around him, and nobody wants to even be near him. But Izuku himself, he has something to do. And he can't worry about these other people. He can't worry about Bakugo himself. He has to worry about what's coming, because he has to get into UA and he has to make sure that he passes those exams. So what does he do? Well, he starts hitting the books, starts studying, starts prepping, and he starts working on whatever this quirk really does and really is. He starts messing around with it, realizing that he is kind of he has some sort of an odd quirk, right? He can kind of phase through walls. He can fly for the most part. And what seems odd as well is that he can now see kind of, well, ghosts, spirits. But there must be more to this. Maybe, just maybe, there's a connection. Maybe he can connect with these spirits. Maybe he can utilize these spirits. He's not sure, but he does know, for the very least, he can fly, he can phase through things, and he can also break things by flying into them and kind of shattering them. Now, in terms of possession, he might be able to. He might be able to actually, take control over people, but he's not sure about that, at least not at the moment. But this training has really helped him throughout these 10 months just kind of figure out what he could do, right? Figure out all the stuff that he's capable of and all the stuff that he could possibly do for the UA entrance exam. Now, after prepping and getting ready, finally the UA entrance exam is upon them, and when he would arrive, he would be seated right next to Bakugo. He would sit down, and Bakugo would sit there and kind of be unsure of himself. He would tell Izuku that he's really sorry. He is. In which Izuku hears him and tells him that it wasn't his fault, that he didn't fall because of Bakugo, that he was up on that roof and maybe he was contemplating it, but he did not fall because of Bakugo. And Bakugo would sit there and shake his head and tell him that he still was on that roof because of him. So it's basically the same thing as if he pushed him or not. Bakugo would go silent, and everybody would listen as President Mike would tell them what's going on. He would tell them that they got to go through this, they got to do this, and that they have the written portion, and then obviously the practical portion, right? All of these different portions of the test, and they're going to have to worry about them all. Now, the written portion isn't too difficult for Izuku, and eventually, actually, Izuku realizes that he could actually cheat on this exam pretty damn easily. I mean, he could straight up send his spirit, or like kind of that ghost form, out of his body, and he could kind of basically just start looking at other people's answers and copying those who he believes are the smartest there. But that's not the best way to do it. He studied for a reason, so he's going to study. Or so he's going to continue to use his studies so that he can pass the exam. He continues to put down different answers, and eventually he's done. Now, this would then lead him to going into the practical portion of the exam. Now, this is where Izuku really gets to show off what he can do. Now, he can turn his whole body into a ghost form. He can go into like a spectral form where he kind of just sits there, and it's more of like a scouting type of thing. But he also can become a ghost itself, where he flies around and he can go into the robots and actually utilize them if he wanted to some extent. Kind of just like sit in there and kind of run the robot into different robots, or he could just kind of explode them from the inside out. In which Izuku kind of flies around through the practical very quickly, mind you, and he just pops robot after robot. Now, this does make him pretty damn tired, right? He does need to make sure that he comes back into his normal form. What he realizes, as the more tired he gets, it feels as if it's harder for him to maintain, that it's harder for him to come back to the normal world. And it feels as if he's kind of crossing the in-between, that he's crossing over and over and over again. But Izuku kind of shrugs this off and continues to try and destroy robot after robot after robot. He destroys a ton of robots, and eventually he would calm down, take a breath, and all the noises around him would stop. He would think to himself, oh wow, I mean, I didn't mean to calm down that much, like that's pretty, wow, okay. Like he feels calm, relaxed at the same time. But when he would turn around, he would realize something, that nobody's there. No kids, no teachers, no robots. City the same, but he's the only one here. He walks a couple steps. His steps feel different. His hands, his body, his arms, it all feels different. And eventually he hears whistling in the wind, and he turns. He sees these ghost-like figments flying around. And then he's confused because they stop. They stop as if they're staring at him. They stop as if they know he's there. He walks over toward them and he doesn't hear anything, but he just hears this kind of light buzz. It's as if they're speaking, but they're not speaking at all. In all reality, they're not making noise. He hears it within his own head. And then eventually, these ghost-like figments, 3 to 4 to 5 of them, would fly at Izuku. Izuku would be shocked and try to block, but then he would realize that they're gone, that they're not there anymore. And as he's realizing this, the area around him would change once again. He sees the hero, or the heroes in training, the other kids, and he sees the robots once again. But as he looks up, he sees a giant robot walking toward him. He immediately freaks out and begins flying away, but he sees that there's somebody behind him that actually needs help. Izuku flies in, grabbing the girl, pushing all the rubble off, and flies her away, basically to safety, so that the 0-point robot doesn't squish her like a pancake, in which she's thankful, but wonders what happened to Izuku. Like, what happened to this guy? Obviously, she doesn't know who he is, but wonders why he was just standing there. That it was as if he was in a different world, like he wasn't present in what was happening. Izuku would immediately look back toward this robot and would see that it continues to march forward at them, and he would immediately feel this power looming. And he would see something. The lights, the figments once again show up, and he begins to see them twirling around the legs of the robots, faster and faster. As they twirl around, the robot's legs would be kind of knocked out from underneath him, and he would crash and break on the ground. Izuku would look, and he would put his hand out, and as he does, these ghost-like figures would fly over to him and would just dissolve into Izuku, as if he was able to control them entirely. But these were seemingly basic little figments, basic spirits. Nothing crazy, not some monumentous creature or anything like that, but this was amazing. He didn't know that his quirk could do so much. He didn't know that he was able to do that. Seriously, this is insane. In which he looks back at Ochako Uraka, in which she's completely shocked as well, thinking that she has no idea how the hell that robot just fell. Well, it's because she could not see the spirits. Only Izuku can. And that world that he entered was a realm for the spirits alone. And they were calling, talking, and wanting to reach out to him to help him. These few spirits are one of many, and they seemingly will help him on his journey, seemingly ready to help Izuku any way they possibly can. But Izuku brushes this off, at least momentarily, and he helps Ochako out, gets her the recovery girl, and leaves immediately, thinking that he needs to get to his job so he can make some freaking money. And yes, this version of Izuku is basically trying to make money as much as possible so that he can live his life, right? This is just like he's in a bad position, but he doesn't want to go into foster care or anything like that. He doesn't want to deal with all of it. But one day when he would arrive back at home, he would see something on his porch. It was a big box, and he would open the box and he would see there were a lot of essentials. There was food, pre-made food actually, and he would realize that it was from the Bakugo family. And he would realize that Bakugo still is feeling some, let's just call it grief, from what he did or what he kind of put Izuku in the position to do, in which he appreciates it, but he doesn't want Bakugo feeling guilty. But at the same time, I mean, he did say those things. He did something really bad, and now he's dealing with the consequences. But Bakugo's path to being a hero himself is not different than Izuku's at the moment, because the same day they would both get that letter, and Izuku would open it up and see that he made it into Class 1A and made it into UA High School. Bakugo would do the same, and he would see the exact same thing. But he, Bakugo, Katsuki Bakugo, was the number 1 student in Class 1A. Look, Izuku might have done quite well, but the spirit world kind of event and also the saving of Ochako kind of balanced the scales a little bit, making it so Izuku couldn't necessarily get the top spots, but he was in the top 5. He did really well, and he got some points from rescue, so he did extremely well in terms of a point basis, just not well enough to eclipse Bakugo at that number 1 spot. But he is no slouch. There is no shame in being in the top 5, so Izuku is happy with where he landed, at least for the time being. Izuku's first day of UA High School is about to begin, and his excitement is through the roof. But before he could even step foot in the classroom, he's invited to the principal's office and told that he really needs to speak with the principal now. Nezu would ask about his guardian / parent / anybody that takes care of him, and Izuku's finally had to reveal that he actually lives on his own, that it's just him and that his mom passed away recently, and that he continues to work kind of jobs to sustain himself. In which, hearing this, Nezu shakes his head, saying that the kid, yes, he is admirable. He can have all the respect in the world for doing so. But listen, you're a kid. You need to be able to feel free to enjoy life and also go into your studies without worrying about taking an extra shift to survive. Nezu tells him that he's heard about this and he thought that this would be true and that he got a key in from some people about his situation. He just wanted to speak with him first. So Nezu tells him he's going to put him on a full scholarship to UA High School, of course, but on top of that is going to give him kind of these incentives where they're going to pay for housing and his food and his essentials and stuff like that, as long as he keeps up with what he's supposed to do. In which Izuku was happy to hear this, saying that he's super grateful and all of the above, and Nezu would then tell him that they even have a place for him on the campus, that there's going to be a place for him. It's nothing crazy, nothing amazing, but it's a small studio apartment that he can live in, and that basically he'll live on campus and it'll be easy commute for him. And if he needs anything, that he can always ask faculty or anything like that, in terms of if he needs any help or something like that. And of course, Izuku is massively grateful for this, and this also gives him a chance to keep up with his training as much as possible and not worry about having to go home or anything like that. Now, the first day of UA would be a tricky one though, nonetheless, because Izuku would learn that Shota Aizawa is a bit of a hard teacher. This guy is wanting the best and the absolute best out of you at all times, and he wants to test them ASAP. And that will start with a quirk assessment test. Now, what would this entail? Well, mostly physical things, throwing a ball, how fast are you, and so on. And Izuku really is able to show off some great skills here. Yes, he's not the strongest, and his throw of a ball isn't the best, but he's able to kind of carry it along with some of the spirits that he has, which he doesn't have full control over just yet. He still doesn't know the restraints or how much he can actually have them do, or how good of of a thing they really are. He doesn't even really know what kind of level he can use them at least at the moment. But still, he continues to impress over and over again, and throughout this entire quirk assessment, he really does impress. I mean, he does a hell of a job. He does just really exceeds expectations on almost every single thing he does, and he gets in around the top 5, maybe even the top 3. Yes, he does fall short of some of the other students, but Izuku's quirk is still basically brand new to him, and it's very, very situational, and there is really no kind of debating that. Izuku's quirk is very unique, but also with the potential of being very powerful, and Izuku knows that. He knows how strong his quirk can really be. Of course, Aizawa does tell them that it was a bit of a bluff of him saying that they're all going, or someone's going to be expelled if they got last. But of course, he just wanted to teach them a bit of a lesson to make sure that they understand that they should be taking everything they do seriously. And that includes the next training session the very next day with All Might himself. Izuku is excited. He wants to obviously show off to All Might. He obviously wants to show what he's capable of, and he wants to do it in his own way. Now, he starts on the hero side with Ochako as her partner, or as his partner, and then he's against Bakugo and Tenya Ida. Now, this is where things are perfect for Izuku. Izuku in this scenario is amazing at stuff like this. Izuku would be able to siege and touch the bomb in a matter of seconds. If he wants to get the bomb ASAP, he can. If he wants to lure people in different directions and distract people, he can. And he's able to basically fly up and immediately touch the bomb after the 5-minute planning timer is over, and everybody is shocked. I mean, they knew he could fly, but he made it look so easy, as if they didn't really stand a chance against him. They knew that the stuff that he could do, and immediately he's able to come from a different direction, fly through a wall, and touch the bomb. And it was over in a matter of a second, or a matter of a split second, and everybody is just standing there like, whoa, that felt unfair. And it's kind of proof that, yes, he didn't show some crazy, like, number one, so much better than everyone else type of potential in the quirk assessment, but there's something for everyone, right? Izuku showed off how good his quirk would be in this scenario. Would it be better in specific scenarios? Of course. Now, are there scenarios that his quirk may not be the best at as well, at least at the moment? Of course. And it's kind of proof that basically the UA entrance exam is kind of out of date, that it's massively out of date. Because imagine how good Izuku is at this. Imagine if he couldn't really destroy robots the way he wanted to, right? He could have fell short and not made it into UA, even though his quirk has such massive upside and massive potential. And of course, All Might would regard him as so and say that Izuku has shown what kind of usage of your powers can be, that raw force and raw strength sometimes doesn't mean jack all. And sometimes it doesn't mean a single thing. In which All Might tells them all to stay focused on this and really analyze your environment and the quirks that others have. That it's very important. And that he feels as if Izuku Midoriya can show that very loud and clear. Now everybody else continues on with their hero training and the heroes versus villains, and Izuku just continues to watch. Everybody goes, your Todorokis, your Momo Yaoyorozus, and so on and so forth. and Izuku awaits the end of the class period. As the class period would end, and as he would head back home or into his little kind of studio dorm, he would then kind of relax, take a load off, but would begin to try his best and connect with these spirits. In his own room, he would enter through the spirit realm, sitting next to and in front of different spirits that he can see. But nothing really is that much surprising. It's all the same. But he knows that these spirits exist, and he knows that soon he'll be able to utilize and also connect with spirits all around Japan. But for now, he awaits the next training session and his next training session at the USJ, and he's prepared for it all. He is massively prepared for it, or at least feels like he is. But what he doesn't know is that the USJ training facility, it's not going to be what he thinks it's going to be, because the League of Villains will invade and a new awakening will be upon us. But for now, that has to wait for part 2 of What If Deku Had a Spirit Quirk. Izuku Midoriya and Class 1A are about to go on to their next training session, and that is in the USJ. But the USJ facility isn't going to be your normal training facility because, well, there's going to be villains invading the USJ. Izuku and his class would enter the USJ being introduced to 13, or Pro Hero 13. And Pro Hero 13 would explain what the USJ is all about, the rescue facility, how they have different scenarios, different areas, different environments, and so on and so forth. But eventually this would lead to portals opening up nearby and portals shelling out villain after villain. Villains would begin to invade, and Izuku would be in a standstill, shocked, seeing these villains pour out. But eventually, when every single villain is out of those portals, he would see 2 that really catches his eye. One who's misty and seemingly the cause of the portals, but the other dormant, a giant figure, a giant being, but the being stands there in complete just brain dead. It's as if this creature is complete and utterly brain dead. And he's confused by this because they both give off some sort of spiritual aura, but at the same time he can't put his finger on it. Maybe if he just gets closer, but he's not so sure. And he can't really just walk up to them. They are villains and they are probably going to attack him. So he needs to make sure, he needs to make sure that he's gonna be okay in the first instance. And Aizawa would tell Pro Hero 13 to protect the kids as he would go off. Izuku, on the other hand, would be told to go get help ASAP, in which Izuku would nod his head and think, you know what, this is a great time for him to basically use his powers, fly off, and go get help from heroes. But there's something he's been working on. He conjures up a spirit that everybody can see, and he tells the spirit to go get help from the heroes, writing down a quick note and giving it to it just in case the spirit can't get its full message across. Now, the spirit would take off flying as well, even as fast as Izuku would be flying, and Pro Hero 13 thinks that this is a great idea. I mean, now Izuku's still here, at least under their protection to a certain extent, right? Like, so they can somehow keep an eye on him. But they really can't keep an eye on him because he would immediately go ghost mode and fly off toward the 2 beings that he's been thinking about. He stands in front of the Nomu and Kurogiri without them even realizing it. But Izuku can feel deep down inside the Nomu that there's a spirit trapped there trying to be released. A spirit that has basically been taken over and no longer wants to do the things they're doing. Kurogiri, on the other hand, seems to be even deeper within this abyss, as if he can't reach Kurogiri just yet, but the Nomu, being that he is kind of dull in the mind, can be reached almost instantaneously. Izuku would change the entirety of the area which wouldn't actually change the outward appearance to anyone else, but him and the Nomu would be alone in this space and time. Izuku would look toward the Nomu to see the person who once was there, and he connects with the spirit, telling the spirit that it's okay, that it was none of this was his fault, and he's going to help him and get him out of there, or at least help him and restore him to what he once was, at least as a spirit. In which he immediately is happy to hear this, and of course thanks Izuku, asking how is a kid able to do something like this, in which Izuku says that he was, well, gifted something, powers of some sorts that allows him to connect with spirits, and he doesn't understand how it works 100%, but he knows that he can help him, and he knows that they can stop all this from happening. In which the spirit would then reach out toward Izuku. Izuku would grab the man's hand and yank him seamlessly out of the Nomu. The Nomu, well, once coming back to the real world, the Nomu would just collapse, fall apart, and almost just lay there like completely and utterly lifeless, as if there was no commands to be made, and that the complete control it had over the Nomu is no longer there. On the other hand, the spirit that is basically free now is then reshaping itself into basically what the Nomu was, or a more kind of humanoid or kind of spiritual version of a Nomu. And now it becomes a helper or a spirit that is tamed by Izuku, seemingly flipping the sides of the battle, and this Nomu that is a spirit now begins to clash with these other villains, smacking and dashing and knocking out a ton of them, as Izuku reminds him not to kill, that heroes do not kill, even in the act of revenge. And the spirit listens to Izuku as if it's obeying its quote-unquote master. But Izuku is not like a controller necessarily, but the spirits have this kind of connection with Izuku and are okay with helping him as if there's some sort of family, you could say. Izuku would watch as the Nomu would knock out a ton of the villains there, and even begin to beat on Shigaraki. Shigaraki would try his best to stop this kind of creature, but he can't do a single thing. He seemingly can't grab onto it, can't latch onto it, at least not fully. Yes, there is some sort of figment that he can touch, but it's different. It's as if this Nomu can be kind of hit by outward blasts. Maybe we're talking fire, ice, and stuff like that if you shot it at it. But in terms of physical touch, it's not going to work. And Shigaraki would then fall basically victim to being knocked out by this spiritual Nomu. And then Kurogiri, on the other hand, would be more or less subdued by Izuku and Bakugo for the moment. They would subdue him entirely, and this spirit Nomu would make sure that Shigaraki cannot go anywhere. The heroes would even arrive and subdue the rest of the villains that are there, but it seems like everybody is safe and everybody has already secured all the villains that invaded the USJ. And it seems as if Izuku is able to make some sort of connection with Kurogiri that basically subdues him, at least for the time being, in which the USJ would more or less collapse, or the invasion of the USJ would more or less collapse, stopping Shigaraki and also the League of Villains from actually getting what they wanted, and that was their hands and, well, killing All Might. But it seems like they didn't realize and didn't come to the conclusion that they'd be dealing with something major like Izuku Midoriya. Something massive, and something that they really weren't expecting is the powers that Izuku holds. But with the capture of Shigaraki and Kurogiri, there are question marks to be made, and question marks that, well, let's just say, Izuku will definitely bring up. Because after all this USJ incident is over, he would begin speaking to Aizawa about Kurogiri, about how Kurogiri has a spirit within him, that there is something that is half spirit but also somewhat still alive. He knows it sounds crazy, but he's not fully within the next life just yet. Kurogiri is just like that Nomu, just like that creature, And of course, Aizawa is shocked to hear this and wonders who this is. In which Izuku says that he can work with Kurogiri, and they can slowly but surely kind of find out the person behind this shrouded mask. In which Aizawa says that would 100% leak into the time of him being at the UA Sports Festival. And that's how he's going to get recognized, that he has to be through that, and he has to do that as well. In which Izuku looks at him and tells him that he never has cared anymore, at least for a long time, that about this little, popularity contest. That a long time ago, he was bullied, and more bullied, to the point where he fell off a building, but a building he was considering jumping from. He no longer cares about this popularity contest. He no longer cares about being this number one hero that shines among them all, because if he's going to be that, he will be that. But it doesn't mean he has to be that through popularity contests and so on. He tells him that he'll make the decision, and his decision is to find out more about what this person is, because this is more important than any other sports festival he could think of. Let the others enjoy it. Let the other people relish in it. And then they'll find out what happens next. Aizawa is shocked to hear such maturity from this kid, but then he thinks that it makes sense. The kid has gone through a lot, has lost a lot, and frankly, he's dealing with a lot. So the maturity, it must fit right in almost instantaneously. In which they'll figure out the whole internship for him later, and it shouldn't be an issue with the type of powers that he's been portraying. Now, this would lead them to days of working with Kurogiri. Kurogiri was and is a very, very, very hard key lock to crack, because at the end of the day, the guy is massively loyal to Shigaraki, and seemingly the lack of kind of spirit there is really hurting this investigation. But eventually Izuku is able to make legway, and eventually he's able to show a face. Izuku, through kind of like this weird astral projection, is able to show the face of someone they once knew by the name of Oboro, in which this would absolutely shock Aizawa. And eventually they would bring in President Mike, who would be just as taken back by this as well, thinking that this is outlandish, that he was dead. He died. They're confused, but Izuku says that based on the connection he can feel, it seems like all for one, Shigaraki, maybe some other guy, something or someone picked him up and turned him into what he is now. And it took a lot of time, a lot of mental fortitude, a lot of mental destruction. They broke him down and rebuilt him once again. In which they ask Izuku, can he be released? Can they let him go? Can they get him out of there? In which Izuku would say, yeah, he can. But he won't be the Oboro that they once knew. He won't even be human. He'll just be a spirit. He'll be gone. And he can make his choice if he would like to leave or not. He can make his choice if he would like to stay. And he can make his choice if he would like to transcend to whatever realm he chooses to transcend to. And they may never see him ever again. In which Aizawa tells Izuku to do it, because the guy deserves to have his choice, and the guy deserves to have his own way out. In which Izuku nods his head as he releases Oboro from his restraints, creating a spirit that would hover right next to Izuku. As this spirit would hover, Izuku would look at it and nod his head, saying that he can do as he wishes now. He can stick around, help him, and be a part of his spirits and live amongst the spirit world that was created when Izuku, for the most part, kind of passed on into that world and then came right back out, which he can live there for now and await helping Izuku as he wishes, or he can go on his own kind of journey, his own spiritual journey, and see where this other world takes him. Oboro would nod his head and would disappear within Izuku. And it seems as if he decided to stick around and help the kid out, and Izuku could tell that Oboro wants to make atone for what he's done so far but also help a kid like Izuku, someone who is passionate, who is willing to basically put hero work and also the people first, become a greater hero than everyone has ever seen. In which Izuku even tells Aizawa that Oboro will stick around and that if he wants to see him, he definitely can, but it just won't be the version he once knew. And he apologizes for that, but that's just what it is. In which Aizawa would nod and say he understands. And he tells the kid that he did a great job, but he also tells him that they need to find him an internship, so they'll be looking. In which they begin looking for Izuku to gain some sort of internship. And frankly, it's pretty difficult. A lot of people are taking the vouch of Izuku being like a very talented kid who has a lot of development and stuff like that, but it seems as if a lot of people don't really want to take on the question mark that Izuku could possibly be. And that's an understanding, or we all understand that, but Aizawa wants still to make this push for Izuku to get what he frankly deserves. And what Izuku deserves is the best agency he possibly could get into, and through a lot of strings and a lot of just working and so on, he would get a couple people reaching out to actually help Izuku Midoriya. And let's just say the one person that really reached out that would catch everyone's eye heavily would be the one and only Sir Night-Eye, in which Sir Night-Eye would say that he's heard about this interesting kid at UA and he doesn't mind taking him on for an internship. He's no sidekick, he's no anything like that. He can learn from one of the big three and he can, get some experience and so on. So that's what Izuku does. He goes on to gain that experience. He works with Mirio. He works with people like Sir Night-Eye, and they continue to kind of learn from each other. Izuku kind of spars and trains a little bit with Mirio, learning a little bit different version of his hand-to-hand combat, being that Mirio and Izuku have a similar way of fighting because of Mirio's permeation and Izuku's kind of ghost or spiritual-like form. It allows them both to relate to each other in some way. And on top of that, Sir Night-Eye is very instructive. Sir Night-Eye knows what his weaknesses are, tells him how to fix them, and they really approach Izuku's kind of hero or future hero prospects as constructive as possible. And they benefit from this massively. Sir Night-Eye grows quite fond of Izuku as well, believing that the kid has such great potential, and from what he's heard, he has even greater potential than they could possibly imagine. This quirk that he has, it's no ordinary quirk. It is no quirk that is going to make you stronger, make you faster, make you whatever. No, it's nothing like that. This is different. Izuku might just be a completely different person. He might just be some sort of a spectral savior as a hero. Now, with that said though, Izuku would continue his training and would continue working with Sir Night-Eye, but eventually that phone would ring and that phone call would come in, and Izuku would hear about Tenya Ida being extremely wounded by the hero killer. Izuku, unable to even be there because of a different scenario, he would then hear that Tenya Ida would be hospitalized by the hero killer, but luckily enough, there was people on the scene like Endeavor that were able to stop the hero killer from escaping, at least for the time being. Now, this would lead them back to UA, would lead them back to their classroom. Aizawa would sit them all down and tell them that this is the casualty of being a hero. That if they don't want this, they're scared of this, and they are terrified of this, they should leave now. That the hero work is not fit for them, and that they are not ready for it if they can't handle things like this. That they should leave now. And that it's that simple. In which everybody stands there wondering, Is anybody gonna leave? Is anybody gonna move? Is anybody gonna basically take off? No. They all sit there. They all think they're ready, and they all have their heads held high to lead on as far as they possibly can for their fellow student Tanya Ida. So they would then go on to work for their written portion of their final exams and also the potential practical of the final exams. Now, these final exams, are very important. So they all study together, they all work hard together, and they all kind of work together, right? Studying and trying to get ready and preparing. But even right before their written portion of the exam, it seems like another wave of emotions will come through, because it seems like Tanya Ida did not make it, and Tanya Ida would pass on to the next life. But Izuku, well, he could feel his spirit. He could feel Tanya Ida hovering around the area. Izuku would tell him to relax and enjoy what is the afterlife. But Tanya's spirit would approach him and then would disappear, well, basically entering the spectral area or spectral world that is Izuku's Quirk has created, the in-between both life and death, same as Izuku. And it seems like Tanya is still destined to be a hero, just alongside Izuku Midoriya as a spirit. Now, as they await the written portion of the exam, they all get ready and they all feel prepared. They all do their best on the written portion, but the practical is what scares them most. What is to come for the practical exam? Izuku awaits, and eventually, when they arrive at the gym, they hear what it's all about. They hear that it will be heroes, or the students, versus the heroes or the teachers. Now, that is something that was not expected by the students. The teachers are absolutely experienced and frankly slightly terrifying. But still, Izuku is told that he's paired up with Bakugo, who at this point, they're pretty well off in terms of a friendship. They're not like anything bad, and Bakugo still feels bad for what he did, but at the same time, it's not like he's not like hating Izuku or anything by any means. They're going to work together for the most part, and that will be perfect because they have to take on someone like All Might, which this is something that is insane and a task that Izuku feels they don't stand a chance in. But Bakugo says that he wants to take on All Might, that he wants to give it his all. And if he doesn't want to give it his all and he wants to escape through those gates, then that's fine. But he wants to test his limits, and Izuku would cut him off and say that if he wants to test his limits and he wants to see where they are in terms of power, in terms of strength, in terms of how good they are with their quirks, then he's all for it. That they will go head to head with the number one hero and they will win. Izuku would stand next to Bakugo as they await, getting ready for the gates to swing open. And as they would open, as the cityscape would be in front of them, and at the end of that cityscape, All Might would stand, they would charge forward. Izuku would charge forward next to Bakugo, and they would begin to fight All Might. Izuku sending spirit after spirit, and would begin to fly alongside Bakugo in his own spirit form, and he would basically hit All Might as much as possible and try to slow him down or weaken him. Now, it's not easy, but as Izuku begins to kind of fall short in terms of raw power, it seems like a spirit comes out to help him. That spirit was the Nomu. The Nomu that was really supposed to just leave and go on to the next afterlife, and Izuku was thinking the same thing, was to allow him to leave. He's been punished enough, but it seems like the spirit behind it continues to want to help Izuku. So it stays. And Izuku's Nomu, basically spiritual or astral Nomu, would begin clashing with All Might. And they all three would go head to head with All Might. And as they do so, everybody is watching, thinking that this is a spectacle, that this is insane. What is this? Seriously. In which, as they're clashing and as they're fighting, another spirit would then show its face. And that spirit, well, would be Tenya Ida. A fast Tenya Ida would dash around, kicking and punching All Might over and over and over again, just a blur dashing across the area, in which everybody stands there in shock, thinking that maybe this was the full potential of Tenya awakened by the afterlife. Maybe he now has the speed, has the grit, has everything, has the potential that he always wanted. And as they continue this onslaught on All Might, Izuku realizes that they can actually win. Izuku continues this, and as the Nomu would restrict All Might, they would get the cuffs and immediately place them on All Might's hands, and immediately the alarms would sound, and someone would come over the PA and say that this test is over, and that the students, Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya, have passed. Everybody in shock, but everybody is screaming. Everybody is excited. I mean, at the end of the day, they just defeated the number one hero, and everybody is in complete and utter shock. But of course, they did beat him under interesting circumstances, like they handcuffed him. He wasn't technically out cold or anything, but still, they defeated him. And everybody is completely over the moon about it. And frankly, even All Might is over the moon about it. Even All Might is happy that this happened, and it shows the potential that both Izuku and Bakugo have, not only individually, but as a team. And everybody is excited that they basically will eventually learn that they all can go on the forest training camp together, and they'll all begin training and getting stronger, getting better in this forest training camp. They all head off on their buses to the forest training camp, and when they arrive, they meet the wild pussycats, who throw them off a cliff like it's nothing. Now, Izuku could just fly away and easily get past, but he does decide to help out as much as possible, using spirits, using anything he possibly can to destroy these monstrous earth-like creatures, something like that, in which they're able to get through relatively simply, and they meet on the other side in the training camp. Now, in this version of the reality, or this version of the what if, Izuku's class would go through this entire training camp very simply. No villain invasion, no crazy villains invading, no nothing like that. Izuku's whole class would get the full training camp to train, to get stronger, to get better, and they continue to learn more and more about their own quirks and other people's quirks as well. Benefiting heavily from this, someone like Izuku does as well. Izuku would find even more strengths of his quirk, more things that he can really do with his quirk, even practicing a possession trick that allowed him to basically take control of one of the wild pussycats. Now, just temporarily, and then he just hopped back out of their body. But that was kind of like the training sessions that he went through, and kind of the stuff that he did to benefit from it. And it was just, at the end of the day, a massive accomplishment. Something that he will look at as something that he can continue pushing himself on, and more stuff he learns, the better hero he's going to eventually be. And that's the reality of it. The more he trains, the more things he does, and the more he's able to kind of get his kind of way around his quirk, learning more and more things, he's only going to get better. Now, as the forest training camp would come to a close, and as all of them would be done training, they would head on their buses and head back to UA. But what they didn't know was that something else was coming. Something else was about to happen that, well, frankly, they weren't that prepared for. Because their bus would eventually get flipped by a Nomu crashing into their bus and slamming them on their side. Izuku would slowly but surely climb out as he sees the Nomu there, about to actually attack them. But quickly he's able to take control, release the spirit, and the Nomu would collapse. And Izuku would allow that Nomu to just leave if it so chooses, but of course that decision is always going to be up to the spirit. As Izuku would help his classmates out, using spirits to actually open ways out of the bus as well, now it's time, well, for them to figure out what the hell is going on, because it seems like Nomus have run rampant, and All For One is looking to end All Might and the One For All legacy right here and right now. But for now, that's the end of part 2 of What If Deku Had a Spirit Quirk. Izuku Midoriya in Class 1A is now kind of pushed over into a city, and they're in a kind of like building that would allow them to be somewhat safe. They're awaiting any news of what's going on, especially with Nomus and so on all about. Izuku was able to basically get his class out of there into a safe space, and it seems now they're just waiting for some sort of news on what's going on in the city. But soon they would realize that the city, well, it's fully overrun by Nomus. It's as if whoever planned this to happen, they wanted to make sure they made a statement. It seems like whoever is doing this, well, who we know as All For One, wanted this to happen perfectly. And Izuku believes that, well, All Might may be out there, and All Might may be trying to stop All For One, but he's going to need help. He doesn't know how he's going to help him. He doesn't know how he's going to manage to do so, but he knows All Might's going to need help. The TVs would then appear and start turning on, and he would see that All For One and All Might are now facing down, but it's so much more than that. It seems like All For One and All Might face down, but there's Nomus that surround them. And not only are the Nomus surrounding them, well, there's a monster, a giant monster, rumbling forward toward them, in which Izuku would tell Aizawa that this is a matter of life or death, that All Might cannot do this on his own, and frankly, he doesn't know if any of the other heroes are going to be that much of use, in which Izuku immediately hears from Aizawa that he's a kid. He cannot go out there and fight these people, even if he holds some sort of advantage over the Nomus, that he can't just leave. In which Izuku tells him that he knows that there's repercussions, and he knows that there are things that are going to happen if he does what he's thinking about doing. But to be honest, he tells Aizawa that he doesn't really care. He would then fly through the wall, going into his ghost form, immediately dashing out toward where the Nomus and All Might is, or where they are, and he would immediately begin summoning as many spirits as possible, summoning all the spirits that he's collected so far, and they begin to absolutely run rampant, and they try to protect as many people as possible. As Izuku would arrive on the battlefield, he would see All Might barely being able to hold off the Nomus and barely being able to kind of dodge the attacks that are coming from All For One, in which Izuku thinks to himself that he needs to protect and help All Might as much as possible. So he begins to channel all the energy within his body, and as this basically as this monstrous creature is slowly but surely closing in on their position, Izuku needs to embrace whatever spiritual powers he has, and he needs to get all of the Nomus, well, completely incapacitated, and also utilize them and their spirits to basically protect All Might and basically save this fight. Izuku would then take all the spirits out of all these Nomus that are currently there, and the Nomu spirits would stand right alongside Izuku. Izuku would stand next to All Might, about to fight All For One, but the giant monster would finally arrive, and All For One would think that this right here is his chance to end this fight. But Izuku tells All Might that this right here is his chance, because Izuku would send spirit after spirit at Gigantomachia, and these spirits would be able to push him just slightly away and stagger Gigantomachia, spirit after spirit. But as Izuku continues to fight alongside his other spirits, he can feel something. He can feel something going on while All Might is currently fighting. It seems as if this aura and this power that All Might is giving off is calling to Izuku. Izuku can feel these spiritual powers that are near, or these spirits that are near him, and also All Might during this fight. He begins to try and summon them, but it's extremely difficult. Something he's never really done is just try to summon spirits out of thin air. But soon, these spirits would begin to show their face, and they really wouldn't be familiar to Izuku at all. But many of them would show up, and they begin to smash and crash into Gigantomachia as well. And their fight styles, they look very, very similar to one All Might. It seems like their power is extremely, extremely strong, and every Nomu spirit and even the users or former users of One for All begin to smash and basically crash into Gigantomachia. As they continue to try to hold him off, All Might would then land his United States of Smash finally into All for One, defeating All for One and finally winning the battle between good versus evil, as Gigantomachia would try his best to basically get over to All Might, but with all the heroes basically undeterred now with no Nomus to worry about, they're able to help as well with Gigantomachia. And yes, there was no planning to stop him, but with all of the reinforcements, with all of the help and everybody around, they would finally be able to subdue him, at least for the time being. And then eventually Midnight would use her just full power to try and knock him out. And with everybody holding him still, and with everyone kind of forcing him to not move for a short period of time, it seems as if Gigantomachia would slowly but surely fade away, especially when he wasn't fully ready for this fight that is to come. It seems as if All for One had to kind of speed up the process of his plans that he wanted to do, but it all fell short because of it. This would happen and everything would be at a standstill, but then everybody could hear cheering from the citizens of Japan. Everybody's cheering. Everybody is just having a good time, thankful that everything worked out the way it worked out. Because if it didn't, well, there's probably a lot of people that would have been injured or even killed. So everybody's grateful for what occurred and grateful for what happened. And Izuku is happy as well. Being able to stop a threat like that with the help of many, many spirits, well, he's happy about it entirely. And frankly, the only thing that kind of sucks is the connection to the One for All spirits would then be cut, and he's unable to hold that connection. It seems as if he rose them once, but then they would lay dormant once again within One for All itself. Now, with that said, Izuku Midoriya would head back and finally be back with his class and head back to UA. But even though that there is, good things that Izuku did from this, there are repercussions, and he would be feeling those repercussions. And those repercussions would be pretty basic, either, physical training or, punishment of not being able to do certain things. And eventually he would be given or would be able to kind of train with his class, try to get their leveled up super moves. And they would level up their super moves, and this would be their way of trying to get more powerful and trying to get stronger. And of course, the training would truly be for one thing and one thing only, and that would be the provisional hero licensing exam. This exam is a very important thing for Izuku and many of the other students, because this is how they're going to be able to get into their work studies and so on and so forth. So Izuku is taking this very, very seriously, and his preparation for the provisional hero licensing exam is borderline perfect. He feels extremely, extremely good about the provisional hero license exam, and frankly, he feels extremely ready. And when they all head over there and they all get ready for that exam, and everybody's kind of like friendly and this and that, and well, let's just say Bakugo sees right through them, saying that these people aren't your friends. These people don't want a picture with you. These people don't think you're a celebrity. These people know that you have a weakness, and they've already seen it and they've already exposed it. So more or less, you better hope that you have gotten that much better and that much stronger in these last whatever how long, because if you haven't, well, then you'll be realizing pretty quick at why they were being fake friendly to you in the immediate kind of current state of that they're at, in which everybody thinks that Bakugo's, Bakugo is just being Bakugo. He's being, a little too angry, a little too untrusting, or whatever it is, right? But no, that's the truth of it. And Izuku knows this as well, but here's the thing. The UA Sports Festival, Izuku was not a part of, and they don't know a lot about Izuku. The cameras only showed so much, and to the naked eye, you can only see so much. So the fact is, Izuku comes into the provisional hero license exam with absolutely no paperwork, no scouting, no nothing. They don't know a single thing. They just know a lot about everyone else, which frankly, if you wanted to know something about someone, it would probably be Izuku Midoriya, because when the first thing they have to do is actually tag 3 lights on multiple people in like a pseudo dodgeball type of thing, well, let's just say Izuku has a massive advantage, because when he starts actually helping his teammates out, utilizing spirits that actually can't be really seen by the naked eye, especially when you're not looking for them, let's just say this helps almost every single person in Class 1A out massively and stops the onslaught before it even happens. And Izuku, not only he can fly, he can go through walls, he can surprise people easily and tag them out. And Izuku, well, he just has a good time and easily passes through that part of the exam. The next part of the exam, though, is a pretty interesting one. You don't have, any brute force, at least initially. It's more rescue based. You start with a home base of some sort, so you guys got to work together and make like a place that people can get medical aid. And Izuku is pretty damn good at doing stuff like this, at least in terms of rescue, because he can fly around, use his spirits to help other people out, and basically get large bits of rubble off of people as well. And he can also be just a flat out amazing person at scouting. So he can scout out where people are, give information on where these people are located, and also what he believes is going to be needed to actually get them out or save them entirely. Now, of course, there are some bumps along the way, but Izuku does help quite a bit throughout this rescue-like process. Now, the real kind of fighting part of things would begin when Gang Orca and his fake villains would arrive. These alarms would begin to sound, and everybody would hear blasting sirens, and villains and Gang Orca would arrive, and everybody would be kind of figuring out who should go face them. And yes, you have the initial attack, but the real two that are going to stand up and face Gang Orca are both Todoroki and Inasa. But they do have a hard time working together. They don't actually work together flawlessly, and really is the furthest thing from flawlessly. And Izuku watches as Inasa and Todoroki kind of mess up their own kind of combos, and they kind of are like individual fighters that have massive amounts of strength, but they don't really work enough well enough together. And they continue to try again, but eventually Izuku would be forced into yelling at them and eventually kind of taking over and leading the front lines against Gang Orca. Gang Orca would clash with Izuku, but with the help of his spirits, Izuku is able to, do his normal thing and fight alongside his spirits, and really kind of limit Gang Orca massively, with the other kind of villains not being able to do much because of the spirits that are roaming. Eventually, though, Inasa and Todoroki would get their head on straight and begin to surround Gang Orca with fire and wind, in which Izuku would just get out of there flying away, basically not allowing them to hurt him at all, and he would get out of the scenario and watch as his spirits would limit Gang Orca from basically kind of getting out or rehydrating or kind of making sure that he can actually sustain himself within that fire-like tornado. And after some time would pass, the alarms would ring once again, and they would be finally finished with the Provisional Hero License exam, in which Izuku Midoriya would pass with flying colors. But in terms of Inasa, in terms of Todoroki, and also surprisingly Bakugo as well, even though he is a little bit more tame nowadays, but he's still dealing with his own issues, well, they don't necessarily pass, and they're gonna have to do a little bit more stuff in the classroom and a little bit more stuff with some training to make sure that they do pass in the near future, so that they can go on and do work studies alongside people like Izuku Midoriya. Now, the work studies, of course, are to be explained, and those who explain them is the big three. The big three would include Nejire, would include Tamaki, and also would include the one and only Mirio Togata. Now, Mirio is someone who has worked with Izuku already, so they know each other relatively well, but in terms of the other two, Izuku doesn't really know much about them, and frankly, he's not going to know much about them because they kind of just yap and talk about random things, or Nejire would, and then Tamaki would be literally so quiet that nobody would even know why he's necessarily there, because he's kind of just in complete silence, not saying a word, not doing anything, and he's kind of just too nervous to really speak to anybody. And Izuku kind of just listens for the most part, and Mirio would eventually decide that the way to show people what the work study is all about is to, make them fight him. And a fight is what Mirio would eventually get. And Izuku would love to take this chance to take on Mirio once again, but he wants to be one-on-one. He wants to take Mirio on and see how he's progressed as a fighter and as someone in hand-to-hand combat, but he doesn't really want to fight with an entire group of people. And luckily enough, of course, Aizawa would actually agree with this, saying that after Mirio is done dismantling the entirety of Class 1A, he can get his chance on a 1 versus 1, in which Izuku would stand there as he watches Mirio absolutely beat the heck out of Class 1A, easily defeating them, and eventually challenging Mirio to his own kind of 1 versus 1. Mirio would kind of be smirking at this and think that this is a good idea, and Izuku tells him that he won't even use his spirits, that it's just him and Mirio. That's it. In which Izuku would go head to head with Mirio, and Mirio would actually have the upper hand here and there, but Izuku's ability to make his whole body go kind of like untouchable, and on top of that, being able to kind of be a little bit quicker through the air and stuff like that, he does have his own advantages, but without his spirits, he does kind of lack the raw power to put down Mirio for good and find that opening that he wants. And Mirio knows that he can't hold the spectral or the ghost form forever, so he really needs to just bide his time. And Izuku would feel the power behind Mirio's punches and could feel that there was so much more that he hasn't discovered just yet. That the power behind Mirio's punches isn't, your typical Quirk. It's not your typical Quirk at all. It's nothing, it's something completely and utterly out of the ordinary. And that's the fact behind it. Izuku can tell, and Izuku can really tell by punch after punch that Mirio is a different type of potential hero. But even though that's the case, he still gives it his all, and frankly, he has a hell of a chance against Mirio, and they go head to head pretty well, but eventually Mirio would win, but that's Izuku without using his spirits at all, which that would change the playing field pretty damn heavily. But of course, that's really not something to be worried about at the moment. This is just training. Now, with all the training concluded and everything kind of done and dusted, Izuku would get an invitation back from Sir Night-Eye's agency, in which they would kind of talk about what they want to do, which would include a kind of search for the one and only Overhaul, the leader of the Shia Hazaikai. And this is something that Izuku will help massively, or can help massively, out with everybody else. And that's exactly what's going to happen. He's going to massively help in this search, mostly because of his ability to scout so heavily and be able to kind of look out for anybody at any times. And what they didn't know is that, yes, this scouting ability is amazing, but their luck would be even more kind of amazing than you could possibly imagine, because they would stumble across Overhaul on a just simple patrol, and that's the swing of things, and that's where they would finally learn what's happening and what's going on, because Overhaul has what seems to be a pseudo daughter, but seems to also be someone who is in completely just kind of in a bad spot. And at the end of the day, it also seems like she's kind of in a torturous spot, even bandages surrounding her and so on. And frankly, it is a scary thing to look at. And Izuku and Mirio would look at each other face to face with Overhaul himself, and it seems like they really do know deep down inside that they have to do something to save this child. But for now, that's where we're going to end off part 3 of What If Deku Had a Spirit Quirk. Izuku Midoriya and Mirio Togata are standing in front of the man by the name of Overhaul, and they have to make a decision. They have to either save Eri right now or let him walk away and, well, do whatever, well, he could possibly do. At the end of the day, they don't know how dangerous this person is. They don't know how fearful they should be, and they don't know how more or less confident they should be. You never know. This could be a scary situation, so you gotta be definitely careful. At the end of the day, they have to be dealing with someone like Overhaul in a very important manner. So Mirio is trying to make the decision, but Izuku would end up making that decision for him, because he would swoop up Eri with one of his spirits and take her away almost instantly. And as all of this is going on, Overhaul would begin freaking out, going to attack the two of them, but Izuku would jump immediately toward Overhaul, and he would eventually go transparent. As he does, Overhaul is about to grab Izuku, but he then can't. And when he's basically next to Overhaul, he would jump into Overhaul's body, and boom, it was almost borderline over, because Overhaul was now taken over. Izuku would then tell Mirio to get the police and everybody as well, get help, and basically he's going to take Overhaul into prison. And he's going to do it right now, because this is some serious stuff, and he needs to hold on to Overhaul, and his mental fortitude and will is pretty damn good, so it's pretty difficult to hold on to Overhaul entirely. Some time would pass, and Izuku would finally get the help that he called for, and everybody would arrive and help out to a large degree, basically maintaining and restraining Overhaul entirely. He would jump out of Overhaul's body, and Overhaul would be in complete shock about what happened, and he would say that he's never felt like a passenger in his own skin, That was the most disturbing thing he's ever gone through, and frankly, it was probably the most disturbing thing he'll ever go through from to this day. And Izuku would just kind of shrug it off hearing Overhaul talk like this, because frankly, he has no sympathy for him. There is no sympathy. There's nothing that is really going to make him feel bad for the guy. Like, he doesn't really care. And on top of that, let's be honest, Overhaul kind of deserves a lot worse. Like, flat out a lot worse. But still, with all that said, Overhaul is finally put into prison, and they no longer have to worry about the leader of the Shiha Zaikai. But the Shiha Zaikai is still running strong, and is something that they're going to have to deal with still at this point. Izuku and many others will team up and kind of come together, and they will head to the Shiha Zaikai base when they can. And when they arrive, they would see that they were kind of like completely and utterly prepared for the conflict. But Izuku was also massively prepared as well, because Izuku would send spirit after spirit towards them, and let's just say this would be the perfect thing for Izuku himself and many others. The spirits themselves, like the Nomus and many others, would do their job very well, and frankly would do a hell of a job in general. And let's just say the spirits themselves would shut down a ton of the incoming villains that were possibly kind of going to be part of the initial invasion. The spirits would handle quite a bit of the heavy lifting, and Izuku and everybody else would clean up relatively easily. Now, with the Shiha Zaikai base completely in ruins and now finished off, there's very little for Izuku to do, at least at this moment. He continues on with his work study with Sir Night-Eye, but there also is some stuff he should do when he gets back to class. And of course, they do have the Class 1A versus Class 1B coming right up. And Izuku is going to be interested in this specifically, because he wants to see how he stacks up with the other heroes, or the other future heroes being that of Class 1B. Now, the type of people he's going to have to go up against are relatively interesting, but the main person or the main people that really interest him and pique his interest is Monoma and also Shinso, who's currently training to actually join one of the classes. Now, he doesn't know that much about Shinso, but he does know of his quirk. In terms of Monoma, he knows that Monoma can actually steal his quirk if he's not fully careful. But he's not too worried about that because, well, let's just say Monoma doesn't have the skill range that Izuku really has with the quirk and with, of course, the spirit-like quirk. So he's not too worried about it. But when the Shinso aspect of this would begin, it would be something that would be kind of, or at least mildly difficult. Dealing with Shinso, who has kind of the ability to use his voice to control people, is a pretty hard task in general. And it's shown to be the truth when he begins to use a voice modifier to mimic other people's voices. This would put them on the back foot, at least initially. That's until the spirits and all the spirits that Izuku has summoned begin to do their job. Because once they start doing their job, it is over. They begin to kind of send a barrage of spirits toward the people of Class 1B, and they really have no way of stopping them. Izuku watches as his spirits kind of take over the battlefield. Nomu-like spirits and other spirits alike, even some smaller, more tame ones, which are just made for mostly scouting or maybe even sneak attacks. And these spirits would easily make the training session very simple. But at the same time, if Izuku was face to face with these people as well, there would be no kind of issue necessarily. Because Izuku, well, in terms of hand-to-hand combat, in terms of fighting in general, he's pretty damn well, good at it, right? He's pretty good at utilizing his own strengths and denying his weaknesses, very similar to the way Mirio fights as well. He takes a very, very kind of large inspiration from Mirio Togata. So he does have some benefits in doing what he's doing, or in benefits in doing everything that he's kind of been up to overall throughout this time. Now, in terms of just all of those things, right? Izuku and his teammates would obviously pass, being that of Mina, Uraka, and also Mineta. They would pass pretty much on the sole basis of Izuku Midoriya, but nonetheless, they were all kind of doing their own thing, all benefiting each other, and kind of doing an overall good job, right? That's what happened. Now, this would lead them to kind of continuing their journeys with different work studies, different internships, and different things like that. This is where Izuku continues his work study with Sir Night-Eye, continues learning under him, learning under Mirio, and honestly taking on kind of mission after mission, and it continues to give him kind of more experience that he believes and feels that he really needs. In which is always a good thing, because experience is a big component of being a hero. So at the end of the day, he's getting all the experience he needs and all of the kind of ideas and fighting strategies that he wants to get into, all wrapped up in a little kind of bundle, and you could even say. Now, Izuku would continue working and training and doing all of these things, and begins climbing up the kind of the ladder of kind of potential heroes in terms of what people believe is going to happen. A lot of people believe that Izuku is going to be a top hero. A lot of people believe that Izuku is going to end up being a hero that is, highly ranked. But for now, being that he's only a first year, he's obviously not going to be highly ranked, and he's not going to be, some hero in the rankings. He still has his provisional hero license, so he's not going to be all the way up there just yet. But nonetheless, Izuku is no joke by any means necessary, and he continues to show this throughout this time, especially because there's going to be a mission coming up very soon that he's going to be involved in. Now, this mission is involving the Meta Liberation Front. The Meta Liberation Front is kind of unknown, at least for the moment, and eventually the heroes would stumble across them. The Meta Liberation Front is kind of like this city that is left on its own, and a lot of people believe that they should just leave it as it is, but it seems like they're getting a little more gutsy, trying to expand more of their little civilization. So Izuku, Sir Night-Eye's agency, being that of Mirio, Izuku, and many others, people like Bakugo, Todoroki would join in as well, and they would take on what this Meta Liberation Front has to offer. And this Meta Liberation Front, hey, they are no joke. They are no joke at all. And, well, Redestro is a pretty strong component of the entirety of the Meta Liberation Front. But, still, with that said, Izuku's Spirit Nomus, and all the help in general that they're going to have throughout this time, will allow them to easily handle what they need to handle, and kind of dismantle this group from kind of with kind of ease. Be able to dismantle, handle, and also deal with this group in general would allow them to kind of see their way through and arrest a lot of these villains that needed to be arrested, or that had more or less search warrants out for them, or kind of their thing out for like a search out for their arrest of some sorts, right? So of course they're able to deal with all of that, and they're able to handle the majority of it for the most part. And this would lead him into kind of his understanding of what a hero, and also what can a hero truly be. Because a lot of these people, they're kind of just misguided, right? A lot of these people, they still deserve their second chances. And this is when Izuku believes that these people who aren't necessarily your traditional or possible traditional heroes, he believes that they should get a second chance. So throughout the years of him in schooling and also his work with different agencies, he begins to try to make some sort of headway on a rehabilitation, something that is near and dear to him, because when he got his quirk, he was in a bad place mentally, and frankly, he felt as if this wasn't their kind of doing or their kind of judgment to be made, in terms of basically saying like, hey, these people don't deserve a second chance. Izuku believes that every single person deserves that second chance, so that's exactly what he's going to give them, and that's what he wants to give them for the most part. So Izuku continues working with this program and tries to make this program kind of doable, and frankly, and eventually, it's able to happen. Eventually, this program is able to be made, and it turns out to be a perfect thing for Izuku. He begins to kind of work with and help many people, and when he would finally step into the world of being a true and confirmed hero, he would have a lot of experience under his belt, and frankly, his agencies would grow massively. Izuku Midoriya, from the very start, was born with what a lot of people would look at as a defect. A lot of people would look at Izuku Midoriya as someone who is less than, as someone who lacks something massive and will never reach the goals he seeks after. But he was able to prove everybody wrong. He was able to prove everyone and everything wrong. And at the end of the day, Izuku has now many people cheering for him, and that includes the people who basically are watching on from a different life and a different world at that. And Izuku is happy to see it, because yes, these are spirits, and some, well, let's just say maybe they didn't really want to stick around, or maybe some decide to, leave whenever they can, but they still believe that the hope and dreams of heroes themselves are followed and kind of centralized around Izuku Midoriya, and they can't wait to continue watching what the kid can do, and they can't wait to see him become an even greater hero than his ancestors alike. But his hero journey and everything that comes with it is basically on the horizon and is about to start rising above even the mountaintops. Now, with all that said, Izuku's entire journey, his entire hero journey, and his entire life as a true hero is about to begin. But that is where the story of My Hero Academia ends, and when we transfer into the story of the Phantom, or even the spectral hero Izuku Midoriya.